Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to your vSphere 7 Install, Configure, and Manage on-demand course. My name is Joe Cooper, and I will be here to walk you through 10 modules of vSphere, ESXi, vCenter, the configuration, the concepts, how to push all the buttons and twist all the knobs, and know your way around the software-defined data center. This course is broken into 10 different modules, so why don't we go ahead and get started right here with module number 1. Now, as we go through this first module, you'll notice a little bit of a format for each of the slide decks throughout these modules. The first one, we introduce you to the topic that we're going to cover. We did that in the previous slide. And in this next slide, we'll talk about why it's important that you happen to be talking about this, the particular topic or the particular chapter or module that we happen to be in. In the case of this first module, this introduction, we're going to talk about why it's important that you have some education around vSphere, around all of the different components in the architecture of the environment, how everything works together. Okay, we're going to get practical skills around architecting, around installation and configuration, around deployment, and around each of those different services that make up the vSphere environment, which is a large part of the software-defined data center that you use to manage the technology around your data center. Okay? So we'll get into each of those components and then talk about how we scale that environment as well. So, of course, throughout the class, there are a number of objectives. What are the things that we are trying to achieve as you go through this relatively formalized education around vSphere? Now, some of the concepts that we'll introduce here, you may not have heard of. And if you are brand new to vSphere and the software-defined data center, don't worry, you're in the right place. We will very soon get an introduction to each of these concepts before we go too much further, so that we're all speaking some sort of a common language here, okay? So speaking of a common language, we're going to be learning how to install and configure ESXi hosts. Well, if you don't know what ESXi is and you don't know what a host is, you might be lost already. Don't worry, we'll get into the definition or really sort of a glossary of these terms right off the bat, okay? So hang in there with us, okay? Once we understand what an ESXi host is, we're going to be looking at the management component. How do we manage all of our ESXi hosts through vCenter and the appliance on which we run these vCenter set of services? Now, we interact with vCenter and our ESXi hosts through the vSphere client. So we're going to learn how to push all the buttons and twist all the knobs in the vSphere client so that we can manage our software-defined data center. Now, of course, along with your ESXi hosts and the CPU and memory that go along with those, we have networking and storage. So we're going to be looking at networking and storage and how all of that is configured within the architecture of vSphere. We're going to be looking at iSCSI storage. We're going to be looking at NFS storage as we create our data stores, which are really just places to keep our virtual machine files. And we're going to be looking at the different types of data stores, NFS-based data stores or VMFS-based data stores. Okay? We're then going to have a place to put our virtual machines. So we'll learn how to create our virtual machines and how to manage those virtual machines, creating multiple systems from the same basic set of templates. We're also going to learn how to clone our virtual machines, how to take snapshots of our virtual machines, which act as a rollback mechanism in case some change that we make to our virtual machines goes wrong. We'll look at a system called our content library, which is a way that we can synchronize our templates between multiple vCenter systems that exist within the larger software-defined data center. We'll then look at how we manage our virtual machine resource usage. How much CPU and how much memory and how much storage, what kind of capacity and what kind of performance do we get out of those sorts of things. So we'll have a little bit of a module on performance and how do we ensure that the virtual machines that we have in our environment get the resources that they're entitled to and that they really do need to run. We'll look at terms like vMotion and storage vMotion as we migrate our virtual machines from one ESXi host to another ESXi host so that we can perform physical maintenance on our computers while still keeping the virtual machines that run on them up and running and intact without any outages and without having to take any downtime on them. We'll then look at the aggregate of resources between multiple ESXi hosts, looking at clusters and the features that we have in our vSphere clusters, like high availability and the distributed resource scheduler and enhanced vMotion compatibility, and so on. Then we'll look at a system called vSphere Lifecycle Manager, which is used to maintain the software on our ESXi hosts, making sure that we are fully patched for bug fixes and security issues and things like that, and so that all of the hosts within our clusters are utilizing the same image for our hypervisor for ESXi. So throughout our course, we're going to divide the topics into what we call modules. Okay? We're, of course, in module number 1 here, the introduction to the course. Okay? In module 2, we'll look at an introduction to the software-defined data center, and we'll try to create a little bit of a common language for ourselves throughout the course. So we'll get a bunch of terms in up front so that we can use those terms even before we've actually discussed them in detail, and so that everybody knows what we're talking about. Then in module number 3, we're going to look at virtual machines. We're also going to look at containers a little bit here in module number 3. We'll look at vCenter Server in module 4. In modules 5 and 6, we'll look at networking and we'll look at storage. In module 7, we'll look at virtual machine management. These are the things like templates and clones and snapshots and vMotion and how we can modify our virtual machines by changing the configuration of CPU and memory and other devices, virtual devices that we configure our virtual machines with. In module 8, we'll look at resource management and monitoring. And in module 9, we'll look at vSphere clusters. Finally, in module 10, we have our lifecycle management. Now, when we come back, we'll have a deeper look at the logistics around the course and around what's next for you in terms of certification, as well as where you can get some additional resources to look at vSphere. See you soon.